The naval blockade failed. Now Trump is scrambling for his next move. Sanctions keep coming. But are they strategy or desperation? Iran grows despite pressure. Does Washington take this to the skies next? Sanctions hit airlines worldwide. Is the US tightening control or losing it? Amid an already fragile ceasefire and stalled talks, Washington is ramping up pressure on Tehran, signaling that diplomacy is stuck and economic tactics are back at the forefront. US Treasury Secretary warned that any companies working with Iran's airlines could face sanctions, expanding the pressure beyond Iran to global businesses tied to it. At the same time, the US has decided not to extend its waiver on Iranian oil sanctions, a move that's already drawing pushback from China and adding tension to global energy politics. Scott Bessent said, and I quote, "Doing business with sanctioned Iranian airlines risks exposure to US sanctions. Foreign governments should take all actions necessary to ensure that companies in their jurisdictions do not provide services to those aircraft, including the provision of jet fuel, catering, landing fees, or maintenance. The Treasury will impose maximum pressure on Iran and will not hesitate to act against any third parties that facilitate or conduct business with Iranian entities." Unquote. Bessent described the warning as part of a broader campaign to tighten financial pressure during the ongoing war. In a bold step forward, Iran restarts limited international flights today, breaking weeks of lockdown triggered by the escalating war. Travel edges back to life, but tensions remain sky-high. Iran has reported that commercial flights are restarting from Tehran's main international airport, marking a key step in reconnecting with the world. US officials say this kind of activity risks helping Iran rebuild economic links despite existing restrictions. The Treasury Department has framed its approach as a financial stranglehold on Tehran, emphasizing the intensity of the pressure campaign. Bessent warned that companies providing fuel, maintenance, catering, or airport access to Iranian airlines could face penalties. Officials say secondary sanctions could also target foreign institutions that continue supporting Iran-linked operations. With tensions still high, Washington's latest warning shows a clear reliance on economic tools to keep Tehran isolated. US Central Command announced that it has stopped yet another Iranian tanker, the MT Stream, highlighting this as proof that its naval dragnet is still active even as critics say Iran keeps finding new ways around it. According to the military, the destroyer USS Rafael Peralta intercepted the MT Stream after it attempted to sail to an Iranian port, presenting the move as a textbook interdiction under Trump's tightening sanctions regime. CENTCOM showcased the incident in a social media post, releasing images of the US warship shadowing the Iranian tanker to signal resolve to domestic audiences and send a warning shot to other vessels still trading with Tehran. Maritime analysis firms have identified the MT Stream as a crude oil tanker flying under the Iranian flag, confirming that Washington is still targeting core arteries of Iran's export network rather than peripheral shipping. Tracking data showed the vessel last reported in the Malacca Strait roughly 13 days earlier, suggesting it had already traveled far beyond the Gulf and underlining how global and far-reaching this tanker war has become. All this unfolded as Iran's foreign ministry accused the United States of the outright legalization of piracy, arguing that US courts and warships are being used together to normalize what would otherwise be seen as theft. Ismail Baghai said, and I quote, "This is the outright legalization of piracy and armed robbery on the high seas. Welcome to the return of the pirates, only now, they operate with government-issued warrants, sail under official flags, and call their plunder law enforcement. The United States must be held fully accountable for this brazenly lawless behavior, which strikes at the heart of international law and international free trade, and threatens the basic principles of maritime security." Baghai's fiery reaction came after the US formally declared the interdiction of 2 captured ships, an announcement that Tehran saw as Washington bragging about its ability to seize foreign vessels at will. Those 2 vessels were seized as part of the broader US naval blockade against Iran, a campaign that combined sanctions, court orders, and warships to squeeze Tehran's oil exports. Reports say each of the captured tankers was carrying around 1.9 million barrels of Iranian oil, making them highly valuable prizes in Washington's effort to choke off Tehran's revenue streams. They were taken under federal warrants issued by US courts, allowing Washington to claim a legal basis for what Iran and some other countries still describe as economic hostage-taking at sea. Overall, US officials and media report that about 8 Iranian tankers have been intercepted since the current blockade began, showing how sustained and targeted this campaign has become. In total, roughly 31 Iran-linked ships have been ordered to turn around or divert under wider U.S. naval operations, a number that includes both Iranian-flagged and shadow fleet vessels. Despite an intense U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports, new data suggests the strategy is far from airtight, with Tehran continuing to export oil in ways that undercut American pressure. The blockade, imposed on April 13th, was designed to choke off Iran's primary source of revenue by restricting ships going to and from Iranian ports, especially those carrying crude. However, evidence from satellite and tanker tracking platforms indicates that Iran has still been able to load and move significant volumes of crude oil even under the restrictions. Satellite-based maritime data showed that at least 4.6 million barrels of oil were loaded onto Iranian-linked vessels since the blockade went into effect, a figure that highlights the persistence of the export network. Roughly 4 million of those barrels reportedly crossed the blockade, according to tanker trackers, a sign that Iran is still punching holes in Washington's strategy and keeping vital revenue flowing. Reports from tanker tracking firm tankertrackers.com conclude that the blockade has disrupted but not halted Iran's oil activity, forcing traffic into more complex and opaque routes. Instead of a full shutdown, Tehran has adapted by using alternative shipping lanes and covert logistics chains to sustain its exports through third-country intermediaries and difficult-to-monitor transfers. Vessels linked to Iran have reportedly succeeded in bypassing U.S. enforcement in the Strait of Hormuz region, according to a Wall Street Journal report on April 26, exposing gaps in the monitoring architecture. Experts say this pattern has underlined how difficult it is to fully seal off a vast and strategically critical waterway such as the Strait of Hormuz, even for a major naval power. Iran has also employed tactics such as disabling or manipulating ship tracking transponders, conducting ship-to-ship transfers at sea, and rerouting vessels through the Arabian Sea and Asian waters to evade detection. Analysts add that even when ships cannot leave the region, tankers can still be loaded with crude at Iranian ports and then later transferred at sea. Rather than a clear decisive victory, the situation has therefore evolved into a cat-and-mouse dynamic at sea, with Iran constantly adjusting its methods to keep exports moving. US President Donald Trump has issued a fresh ultimatum to Iran, this time giving Tehran 3 days. Trump told Fox News that Iran now has 3 days before its oil pipelines explode from within. He also claimed there would be permanent damage to Iran's oil wells if oil flow is not restored. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "What happens is that line explodes from within. Both mechanically and in the earth. Something happens where it just explodes, and they say they only have about 3 days left before that happens. And when it explodes, you can never rebuild it the way it is. It's a very powerful thing that takes place sort of having to do with nature." Unquote. According to Trump, the ongoing US blockade would create catastrophic mechanical stress inside Iran's oil infrastructure. He further claimed that this pressure could trigger spontaneous explosions underground and within transport lines. However, energy experts say pipelines are typically equipped with safety valves and sensors designed to halt pumping before such failure spiral. They also note that if oil cannot move through the system, operators usually stop production at the source itself. That is why some experts believe Iran may still have roughly 2 to 3 months of inland storage before any forced production cut becomes necessary. Iran's vice president and head of the Strategic Energy Policy and Management Organization, Ismail Sagab Esfahani, has also reacted. Esfahani warned that Iran would retaliate against countries backing any damage to its oil sector. In a sharp response on X, he said, "Our math is different. 1 oil well equals 4 oil wells." Ismail Sagab Esfahani said, and I quote, "If any part of our infrastructure, including oil wells, is damaged as a result of a blockade, we guarantee that 4 times the damage will be inflicted on the same infrastructure in countries that support the aggressor. Our math is different. 1 oil well equals 4 oil wells." Unquote. After Trump abruptly cancelled talks, Iran quietly submitted a fresh proposal through intermediaries, signaling that Tehran still sees a negotiated path forward even as warships face off at sea. In that proposal, Iran suggested first ending the war and then moving to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, effectively tying maritime de-escalation to a broader ceasefire and rollback of the blockade. Crucially, Tehran pushed nuclear discussions to a later stage, making clear it would not fold its nuclear program into the initial package and instead wanted to separate battlefield de-escalation from long-term nuclear bargaining. According to officials, the US government convened a high-level security meeting to evaluate Iran's proposal, weighing the risks of keeping Hormuz closed against the political cost of accepting Tehran's terms. However, Trump was reportedly unhappy that Iran's offer sidelined nuclear talks, with sources saying he sees any deal that does not touch Tehran's nuclear program as a personal and strategic defeat. After all, Trump has sold this war to his base and allies as a crusade to dismantle Iran's nuclear program, making it harder for him to accept any ceasefire that does not deliver visible nuclear concessions. He has repeatedly declared that Iran can never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon, turning that line into a personal red line that now constrains his room to maneuver diplomatically. Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has traveled to meet Vladimir Putin, seeking Russian backing as the war with the US settles into a stalemate and diplomatic channels with Washington remain blocked.